It began as soon as he entered our house. She was carrying the kind of solidity that fills a room before you even know why, and she was older than my husband. He slipped his coat off, allowing the rain to slide off, and something in the air tightened as his eyes locked with mine. It was just a sudden shift that I felt everywhere, not loud or disrespectful. He took his time, he kept his eyes fixed on it. He just filled the doorway, acting as though he had been here 100 times and was fully aware of how the home would respond to him. My spouse gave him a brief giggle in greeting, but the man's gaze remained fixed on me, following every subtle shift in my posture and every unintentional breath I took. The room then entered a dark pulse of glow and shadow as the lights flickered once, twice, and just enough. In an instant, he moved in my direction. I was close enough to feel his warmth before he did, but not close enough to touch, and I felt something I wasn't expecting in that split second of darkness before my husband had even turned around. Please take a time to like and subscribe to this video before we continue. It keeps these stories coming, is quick, and benefits the channel more than you might imagine. Your assistance truly does make a difference. Let's get started. The air instantly changed as he moved deeper into the living room. His presence was unavoidable but heavy in a way that didn't feel invasive. The room seemed smaller than it had moments before as he slowly pulled off his coat, shrugging off the chill and exposing a sturdy frame. My spouse came over to hang the coat, and the man briefly turned his head away from me for the first time since coming. Without giving it any thought, he closed the remaining space as he turned around. Because his shoes were still wet from the rain, they left behind faint footprints on the floor that precisely matched his path. He gave me a soft, low hello, and the way he spoke it made my shoulders tense up. Not because I was uneasy, but rather because he was close enough for his body heat to reach the air around me. I was left in that proximity for a heartbeat longer than was required as my husband stepped behind him to grab his backpack. The man didn't apologize or change. He just maintained the situation with an assurance that seemed much too normal for someone who had never visited my house before. He looked around the living room slowly and deliberately, as if he was assessing the area before making a claim. The lights flickered again after he changed his position, but the slight bend of his posture made me notice how wide he was, how anchored he felt, and how easily he seemed to fill the room. After giving me a quick glance, he moved in my direction as though he was stabilizing the situation. I ought to have relocated. Instead of turning away, I remained motionless and allowed him to approach. My spouse called out something about putting on coffee as he entered the kitchen, and the house's whole rhythm shifted as soon as he moved away. Without an invitation, the man followed me into the living room. His movements are quiet enough to be imperceptible, yet leisurely enough to seem deliberate. Even before I heard him, I could feel him behind me, his weight like a warm current spreading across my back. I bent slightly as I reached for a book on the table, and when I straightened up, he was right there. Not pressing on me, but close enough that I could feel his heat brush my shoulder. His steady gaze gave me the impression that he was fully aware of the impact his breath had on my skin, and it didn't feel unintentional. In a tone so quiet and gentle that it seemed closer than it actually was, he inquired about my day. I felt anchored to the ground as the sound of his words filled the gap between us. He moved with me, matching my movement without making it evident, even though I tried to move away and give myself even a small amount of space. He followed me as I made my way to the kitchen doorway to make tea. It wasn't until he was standing behind me, close enough that his chest appeared to hover close to my back, that I heard his footfall. There was no mistaking his kindness. The kettle made a hissing sound. There was a quiet snap from the cupboards. But he was the only thing I could think about. The way that he stood, the way he breathed, how our bodies didn't feel as close together as they should have. My hands were calm as I set the glasses on the counter, but my pulse was anything but. He aligned himself with the side of my face and leaned in slightly without touching. Every time he spoke, his breath touched my cheek, and I could feel him notice when I didn't move away. I ought to have taken a more expansive step. I ought to have interrupted the moment. He knew I wouldn't, but I didn't. The sound of my husband's phone ringing pierced the silence. After taking a quick look at the screen and muttering something about having to take it outside, he moved onto the balcony and closed the door. In an instant, the house was silent, leaving only him and me. The man moved past me and sat down in the chair that my husband usually occupies. Not next to it, not close to it, but right inside it. With a calm surety that permeates a room, he sat back, his broad shoulders falling into the cushions as though they were intended for him. He didn't act as though he didn't understand the significance of the seat. He made a deliberate claim. As I went slowly, steadily and apologetically, his eyes followed me. The focus was no longer veiled. It was clear, concise, and open enough to make it obvious where his eyes were and what he was seeing. He seemed to get more absorbed in the moment with each step I took. He moved his leg slightly to reduce the area next to him as I passed him on my way to the bookshelf, making sure I felt how near I would need to pass without actually obstructing me. Instead of either of us reaching for it, the new geometry of the space generated a single point of contact as the fabric of his pants gently brushed against my thigh as I slipped past. Nevertheless, the air reacted as though a much more significant event had occurred. His head tilted, acknowledging the closeness in a way that made my breath catch, and I halted for a half-second, not because I was startled. I was not touched by him. He made no requests of me. He simply observed my reactions, taking in every slight change in my stance, every breath I attempted to hide, and every moment I spent in his circle. And in that quiet, I realized something I had not yet grasped. The space had sided with him. My husband's voice could be heard weakly through the glass of the balcony door, which remained closed, far away enough to seem inconsequential. Everything you already sense is heightened by the low hum that permeates the place. With a serene assurance and no out-of-place sound, the man got up from my husband's chair as though the room had always been his. He approached me without saying anything. He was not required to. Every deliberate step he took constricted a part of my chest, and his presence spoke more than words could. He cautiously and gently drew closer. With every stride, the air changes. His shoulders were wider, his height seemed greater in the quiet, and I could feel his breathing getting deeper than I could hear. The distance between us had virtually disappeared by the time he was standing right in front of me. It was held in a delicate equilibrium, without physical contact, but it seemed more intimate than anything could have. I became conscious of the wall behind me, which was simply aligning everything rather than pushing me into it. Therefore, moving away would have been a decision that I didn't make. The moment seemed to go on forever as he slowly raised his hand. His hand lingered close enough to my side that I could feel its warmth through my clothing. He didn't bridge that final centimetre of separation or lower it any lower. He merely allowed it to linger in the space between us. I remained motionless in response to a silent query. The first thing that betrayed me was my breath. He instantly observed a slight change in my chest. His hands remained steady and tilted slightly toward my hip as he tried to see how much I would tolerate. I gave in to everything. He leaned in slowly enough that I could feel every tiny shift before I could see it. His breath warmed the line of my neck as his chest hovered near mine, and his subtle rise and fall sank with my own breathing. There was a palpable sense of expectation throughout the room. My knees tightened against the floor as he angled his head toward my ear without actually touching me, just near enough for the warmth of his breath to slowly and deliberately sweep across my skin. There, he let out a slow, deliberate breath that was more powerful than anything he could have said. His arm moved slightly, implying that he could pull me into him with ease and that he could easily bridge the distance if he so desired. However, he didn't. He let the near contact do the work by stopping just short. My body responded before my mind did. The tiniest lean toward him, hardly perceptible, but obvious to an observer. He noticed it right away, and I could tell he had felt it by the small pause in his breathing. He didn't approach, he didn't retreat. He maintained the moment, allowing our stress to build until it seemed as though the room was holding its breath. At that moment, his steady, low voice came close enough to my skin for me to feel it before I heard it. Stay put. I didn't. I was unable to. His breath was steady and warm as he leaned back near my ear. There was no room for doubt as his presence pushed into the area surrounding me. The faint sound of my husband's voice came from outside, too far away to be significant and too unimportant to affect what was happening inside. The world shrank to our intimacy for a single suspended second. His hand was lingering at my side, his breath against my neck, and my body would not move. And I realized how near I had let him to get in that silence. Would you have created distance or allowed the proximity to settle the way I did if someone stood in front of you like that, close enough for you to feel every breath he didn't bother to mask, and the only reason the moment held together was because neither of you moved away? Let me know in the comments. I'll be keeping an eye on your responses. If you read this tale through to the end, please hit the bell, like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.